A poor man donated a handful of dates. People laughed. Then Allah responded. They looked at what he carried. Then they looked at what others had brought. And they laughed. Because to human eyes, the gift seemed too small to matter, too small to change anything, too small to be remembered. Yet more than 1,400 years later, his story is still being told. Because people saw dates, Allah saw sacrifice. The year was difficult. The heat was relentless. The desert stretched endlessly beneath a burning sky, and the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was preparing for one of the hardest expeditions in Islamic history, Tabuk. A journey unlike most others, hundreds of kilometers across harsh terrain, little shade, little comfort, little certainty. The expedition would require provisions, food, water, animals, equipment, everything. And everyone in Medina understood what that meant. This was not a moment for comfort. It was a moment for sacrifice. So the call spread throughout the city. Give what you can, support the believers, support the expedition. And Medina responded. Men arrived carrying gold, others brought silver, some brought food, some brought animals, some brought whatever they could spare. The city seemed alive with generosity, and among those stepping forward were some of the wealthiest companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, men whose donations filled people with amazement, men whose donations could support entire groups of travelers. Their generosity was real, their sacrifice was real, and everyone could see it. But while eyes followed the large donations, another story was unfolding quietly, a story almost nobody noticed. His name was Abu Aqil. Most people today have never heard it. He was not wealthy, he was not powerful, he was not famous. No caravan carried his name, no tribe celebrated his status, no crowd gathered around him. He was simply a poor believer trying to live honestly. The kind of man history usually overlooks, the kind of man people forget while he is still alive. Yet Allah had written something different for him. The night before the donations were gathered, Medina slowly fell asleep. Homes became quiet, doors closed, families rested, lamps dimmed beneath the darkness. But one man was still awake, Abu Aqil. While others slept, he was working, carrying loads, lifting weight, moving from place to place beneath the night sky, trip after trip, hour after hour. The work was exhausting. His shoulders ached, his hands burned, dust clung to his clothes, fatigue settled deep into his body. But he continued, because poverty rarely gives a person the luxury of stopping, and responsibility is often heavier than any burden carried on the back. His family needed food. Tomorrow mattered. The next meal mattered. Everything mattered when you possessed almost nothing. So he kept going, long after others had gone home, long after the city had fallen silent. Eventually, the horizon began to brighten. The work was finished, and his payment was placed in his hands. Not gold, not silver, not wealth, just a small amount of dates, a simple payment, a modest reward for an entire night of labor. He looked at them quietly, perhaps counting them, then counting them again, because poverty teaches a person to count everything. Every coin, every piece of food, every opportunity, every loss. And as he held those dates, a new struggle began. Not a struggle of the body, a struggle of the heart. The call for Tabuk was still echoing through Medina. Give what you can. Support the believers. Support the expedition. Abu Aqil looked at what he had earned. He could keep all of it. No one would blame him. No one would criticize him. He was poor. His family needed it. His home needed it. His future needed it. And poverty has always been given permission to hold tightly to whatever little it possesses. Yet faith often asks a different question. Not, what can you spare? But what are you willing to trust Allah with? Abu Aqil stood there holding those dates. A meal, relief, security, a little less worry, a little less hunger, a little less fear. Then he made a decision. He divided them, part for his family, part for Allah. And in that moment, a handful of dates became an act of trust. Later that day, he walked toward the gathering, quietly, without attention, without recognition, without expectation. The gathering was already filled with remarkable generosity. Large donations had been brought. Significant contributions had been placed before the Prophet, peace be upon him. The scale of sacrifice was impressive. People were talking, watching, observing. Then Abu Aqil stepped forward and placed his dates among the donations. A small offering, a humble offering, a sincere offering. And for a moment, it seemed insignificant, at least to human eyes. Then came the voices that often appear whenever sincerity appears. The voices of mockery, the voices of arrogance, the voices that know the price of everything and the value of nothing. The hypocrites looked at what Abu Aqil had brought, and they laughed. A handful of dates. Was this supposed to help an expedition? Was this supposed to matter? Was this supposed to make a difference? To them, the donation seemed laughably small, worthless, insignificant. But their mistake was the same mistake people still make today. They measured the gift. Allah was measuring the sacrifice. Because those dates were not merely dates, they were an entire night of labor. They were aching shoulders. They were tired hands. They were hours of exhaustion. They were a hungry man's earnings. They were trust. They were sincerity. They were faith. And none of that could be seen by people standing in the crowd. People saw dates. Allah saw the story behind them. And the hypocrites revealed something about themselves that day. They mocked the wealthy, and they mocked the poor. If someone gave a large amount, they questioned his intentions. If someone gave a small amount, they questioned his value. Because the goal was never fairness. The goal was ridicule. A heart that wants to mock sincerity will always find a reason. Too much, too little, too visible, too hidden. There is always another excuse, but Allah exposed them. Then Allah revealed words that exposed the mockery of those who laughed at sincere believers. Their arrogance was not hidden. Their contempt was not hidden. And the sincerity of believers was not hidden. Because Allah does not judge as people judge. People count numbers. Allah knows intentions. People see appearance. Allah sees reality. People measure what enters the hand. Allah measures what leaves the heart. And perhaps that is why this story survived. Not because of the amount, but because of what it revealed. Think about it. Most people cannot tell you exactly how many dates Abu Aqil gave. The number disappeared long ago, yet the lesson remained. Because the lesson was never in the quantity, it was in the sacrifice. The lesson was never in the dates, It was in the sincerity. And sincerity has a strange relationship with time. It survives long after wealth disappears, long after names disappear, long after entire generations disappear. The expedition ended. The desert grew quiet again. The soldiers returned. The years passed. Then decades passed. Then centuries passed. The dates disappeared. The marketplace disappeared. The roads changed. The city changed. The people returned to Allah. Even the footprints of Tabuk vanished into the sand. But one thing remained: a poor man, a handful of dates, and a lesson that refused to die. Today, we live in a world obsessed with size. Big achievements, big numbers, big audiences, big recognition. People often believe their small acts do not matter. A small charity, a quiet prayer, a hidden kindness, a private sacrifice, a good deed nobody notices. And because nobody notices, they assume it is insignificant. But Abu Aqil's story says otherwise. The world may overlook small deeds. Allah does not. The world may ignore hidden sacrifices. Allah does not. The world may see only the gift. Allah sees the struggle behind it. The world may see the amount. Allah sees the heart. Abu Aqil did not become memorable because he possessed much. He became memorable because he gave from what little he possessed. And that is often the harder sacrifice. Abundance says, you will still have enough. Need asks, what if you don't? Yet he trusted Allah anyway. And that trust transformed a handful of dates into a lesson for every generation that followed. People saw something small. Allah saw something immense. People saw dates. Allah saw sacrifice. People laughed. Allah honored. And perhaps that is why more than 14 centuries later, the laughter is gone. The mockery is gone. The crowd is gone. But the sincerity remains. Because on a hot day in Medina, a poor man stepped forward carrying a handful of dates. Most people would have forgotten him, but Allah did not, and that made all the difference.